welcome everyone here to New York and to Columbia, and to thank you all for coming. We're really very excited about this conference, and we think it has the potential to be a very engaging and productive experience. And if you've taken a look at the agenda, you can see that this is going to rely a lot on you. We're really kind of thrilled with the people that are participating in this event, and we're going to depend a lot on you over the course of the next 2 days kind of to engage in different discussions. And I, for one, am really excited to see what comes out and to listen to the perspective of the people in this room. Before we get to that, we're going to hear from a few speakers, starting with our very own conference chair, Steve Ziebiak, who is also the Director General of the IRI. Steve has also, as you may know, Steve has also worked on ocean atmospheric interactions and is credited with participating in developing one of the first dynamical models of El Nino. So without further ado, I'll just let Steve welcome you here.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning to all of you, and welcome to the first International Conference on Climate Services. Speaking on behalf of the IRI and the Earth Institute at Columbia, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to host this important forum. It is about things that matter to us very much here, whether measured in terms of IRI's mission to enhance society's capability to understand, anticipate, and manage the impacts of climate in order to improve human welfare and the environment, or the Earth Institute's broader mission to address the challenges of sustainable development. Climate services have a role to play in these grand challenges. What exactly do we mean by climate services, and why should people care about them? I was asked this in an interview preceding the conference, and it's a fair question. Well, while any description you can find highlights the centrality of climate information in climate services, a perhaps more useful description can be framed around what they're meant to do: enabling more climate-informed decision-making and climate-smart policy and planning. The need and the potential for this has been increasingly articulated over the past decade or more, leading most notably to the initiative to establish a global framework for climate services, facilitated by the World Meteorological Organization with many partners. And we are very fortunate to have with us the Deputy Secretary General of WMO, Mr. Langlois, the President of WMO, Mr. Grimes, and other colleagues leading efforts to develop the global framework. And we look forward to hearing from them later today and throughout this conference. As the needs for climate services are increasingly being recognized, the ability to meet those needs throughout the world is still very limited. Decision makers need to understand better what information is available, how trustworthy it is, and how it can be used to improve their decisions. In many lower-income countries, those most vulnerable to climate impacts, there is little, if any, capability to meet these needs in many instances. Even in higher-income countries, the demands outstrip what existing services can provide. The scope of the challenge is part of the problem, cutting across, as it does, many and diverse sectors in both the public and private domain. But beyond this, the knowledge itself is still emerging. What factors are driving the impacts? What is the most relevant climate information? How can it best be translated to address specific decisions? What are the best tools and strategies for managing risks and capturing opportunities in each domain? The overall challenge is so great that virtually every individual effort today is inadequate. No institution, indeed no nation, currently is poised to solve this problem fully in the foreseeable future, despite the sense of urgency to do so. So the idea emerges: what if the larger community banded together to face the challenge? What if relevant observations, analyses, and predictions could be shared to produce better information products everywhere? What if we could share experiences with new approaches, tools, and information in each problem setting? What if we put our collective experience and expertise together to develop and refine good practices? What if curricula and training programs could be established around these products and practices? What if research priorities could be informed by this collective experience and learning? This is the vision behind International Climate Services. By organizing our efforts, more can be learned and more progress can be made everywhere, faster, at less cost. This is the motivation for a global framework, and equally, it is the motivation for us here today in forming a climate services partnership. I posit that this assembly and what can come from it offers an opportunity. The ICCS will discuss and debate the issues and the challenges around climate services, as have many other forums. But what the sponsors have maintained should distinguish the ICCS is its focus on actions. Actions to further demonstrate and evaluate climate services, and actions to demonstrate the value of collaboration. We expect helping to make the case for greater collaboration under a global framework. The agenda here is very ambitious. We are supposing that in 2.5 days, concrete plans of action can be devised and commitments made on at least 3 different fronts, which I'll lay out in a minute. Perhaps these expectations are foolish, but I want to argue that they are instead realistic for the following reason. You all are here not to debate or explore the concept of climate services, but because you are already engaged, committed, and invested in either developing or utilizing climate services. What's more, you bring diverse and complementary experience, knowledge, and resources. You represent national governments, development agencies, UN organizations, humanitarian organizations, other NGOs, foundations, meteorological services, and academic institutions. You represent climate, health, water, energy, agriculture, food security, and disasters communities, among others, just in this room. You represent every region of the world. You don't need to be convinced about climate services. As I say, you are already investing in them. And I'll wager that most, if not all of you, are dissatisfied with the level of current efforts and are ready to join forces where real progress can be made. So this group, by putting our heads and some of our resources together in a climate services partnership, can lay the groundwork for networks to grow, for knowledge to develop, and for the case to be made for global climate services. Certainly, in absolute terms, the voluntary actions we can commit to here will be modest, but I would argue both the near-term benefits and the longer-term impact of what we do can be disproportionately large. So I hope you will agree with me that we have something significant and important to do here over the next 2 days. We have real work to do, but I hope you will also enjoy this experience. I know I plan to. So with that, I'd like to now just take a moment to go through for you the plan for this next couple of days, what we're going to be doing and where it's focused. So I hope to convey here that there's a sense of motion to what we're doing, all pointing toward things that come out, actions on several different fronts. What we're starting with this morning are a few presentations to help set the scene for the nature of what we're doing and what its relevance, wider relevance is. We will also get a chance to hear about the implementation progress in the global framework for climate services. And then we will have a chance to hear a variety of different perspectives on the state of climate services, their implementation, their value, etc., from different perspectives in both developed countries, developing countries, research, and other domains. That will help set the general scene for the discussion, hopefully putting a number of issues already on the table. The next part of the conference will be to divide into groups. And we will first have a set of breakout sessions that try to dig a little deeper into what the various needs are in climate services. And we've identified these areas, and we'll ask you all to kind of divide up into groups to address these. And in your discussions, what we would like to have everyone keeping in mind are, yes, what are the issues, what are the challenges, what are opportunities, but in particular, where are there opportunities for actions that can be taken by ourselves and others that we collaborate with in order to address some aspects of those challenges. Starting to think about what it is that could be done, that we could basically catalyze to begin to address some of these challenges. Along the same vein, the next set of 3 breakouts will consider aspects of what can enable good climate services. Again, we'll divide up looking at issues of engaging the research, scientific community, some policies and institutional issues, and some issues around funding. Coming out of that, we're hoping to have a lot of good ideas already emerging about the areas that are ripe for action and what we, in fact, could do to begin to address them in many cases. And we will take that into account. I have a conference committee who will work with me to kind of distill that into a limited number of sort of action areas, maybe a handful, 5 or 6 of them, where we will really try to dig in and do something more significant. And then the final set of working groups will be organized around those. So we haven't preset what the final thing is. Perhaps this is risky, but I think all of us who've been working on this think that it actually will be really exciting and open to what the conversation actually brings out in the first round. After all, it's what we all are interested in and engaged in that we want to push forward with. It's not some other agenda. And we're confident there are going to be plenty of good ideas coming out at that point. And then the final thing will be to catalyze 3 streams of action coming out of this. One is just something about the ongoing ICCS process. Assuming there's anything in the next 2 categories, we envision an ongoing process where there may be subsequent gatherings and a process to go with that. But that will need a little bit of working out, which we'll have a group looking at that. Then the knowledge management is this notion of we're not fully benefiting from what each other are doing currently. And what we want to do is to have a kind of facilitated, curated management of the knowledge and information. I mean, what's being learned, what's being done, what experiences are, what new things are being piloted, how are they working, and so forth. We're going to discuss what is important to capture during the deliberations here, but we want to have a process that will be managed going forward where we actually put this together in such a way that it will become a resource, first and foremost for ourselves, but then more generally for others that are engaged in thinking about or developing or taking up climate services. And finally, we expect to have from these breakout sessions a limited number of areas where groups, subgroups of us are interested in doing something together. This is going beyond what we're doing currently, whether it's an activity to actually establish some kind of, could be a new product. It could be thinking about how to begin to move toward establishing what we can call good practices. It could be an actual project that would focus on a region or a theme where working together there's something more that could be done. It could be simply capturing more information about something. They will be what they are, but we want those to be articulated by the end of the conference so that we have a way to carry forward work and report back in ways that are useful to us. And all of this, we think, will help ourselves in what we're doing already, as well as being able to feed into a process, a more formal process that's ongoing for developing more organized climate services, that we would have more experiences, more feedback, more opportunities to establish the value. In the end, what needs to happen is to establish the value for investment in climate services in order to have them really come to their full potential. So that's what we're doing. It's flowing, and I hope that everybody is coming. I've talked to many of you. I know you all have some good ideas and some enthusiasm going in, and let's make the most of it. I think we can really make a difference here with this informal arrangement that could have big impact. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that, Steve. So our next speaker around here is a man who really needs no introduction, director of Columbia's Earth Institute, Kettle Professor of Sustainable Development and Special Advisor to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Dr. Jeffrey Sachs is also president and co-founder of the Millennium Promise Alliance, a nonprofit organization aimed at ending extreme global poverty. Since his days at Harvard, Dr. Sachs has worked with a range of different organizations, including the World Bank, the IMF, the OECD, the WHO, and UNDP, to engage with issues of economic development, poverty alleviation, and enlightened globalization. He has campaigned tirelessly on the issue of climate change and climate adaptation, and is the author of numerous books, including most recently, The Price of Civilization, Reawakening American Virtue and Prosperity, a look at the United States economic ills. Please welcome Dr. Sachs to the podium.
Kathy, thank you very much. And Steve, thank you for your leadership of IRI and for bringing a lot of friends and colleagues together from all over the world. And let me thank all of you for being here at the first International Conference on Climate Services. I'm sure it will be the first of many, because this is a very important topic and an excellent idea to have this community gathered together. And I'm sure that you will make enormous progress in the 2 days on practical approaches that can strengthen what all of us are trying to do. It's a great honor for us to have you here. I think our starting point is very clear. We have entered the Anthropocene. We are in the midst of human-induced climate change. The world is becoming very unstable, and there's a lot more to come. So we already have crises in food supplies. We have extreme weather events at increasing frequency. We have disasters that are well beyond the scope of national capacity or regional capacity to deal with. And climate is playing, of course, a profound role in all of these. I spent a lot of the summer working with the governments in the Horn of Africa about the drought, which is, as you know, a massive and I think the world's greatest humanitarian crisis at the moment, putting in peril the lives of several million people, creating waves of instability through East Africa right now, because even when survival isn't immediately at stake, all of the economies of the region are deeply destabilized by the soaring food prices. There's high inflation, there's unrest, there's instability, there's growing violence, and of course there is the famine itself, and many, many people perishing, and vast movements of population. Now, The drought is the proximate cause of this, 2 years of failed long rains and short rains, and against a backdrop that has several features to it. One is that this is already one of the poorest and most unstable parts of the world. Second, there has been approximately a 20 to 25% secular decline of precipitation over the last 2 decades. Third, populations are soaring in this region, so there's tremendous demographic stress. And this afternoon we'll have another meeting here sponsored by the Earth Institute on the arrival of the 7 billionth person on the planet, which is scheduled by UN Population Division to occur on October 31. And that reminds us that we're in an era of extraordinary demographic stress in the poorest countries where fertility rates remain high, population growth remains very high, ecosystem degradation and vulnerability remains very high, and into this we're entering increase in climate risk and climate instability. When an event like this happens, there is no easy way to garner information about what's happening actually. There are, of course, some warning systems. There is a UN process of climate information. But I have to say it doesn't really go very deep. It may have some short-term mapping. It may have some information about ENSO teleconnections. It doesn't begin to answer many questions that arise inevitably by policymakers and communities. Is the Horn of Africa crisis this year a bad accident, or is it part of long-term anthropogenic change? Big question. It's a very important question from many, many points of view. I could make a phone call to Steve and to Shiv and to others here at IRI and get a considered view. But governments have no place to turn right now that's reliable. They can't really get even an understanding of the scientific debate. The Horn of Africa debate is actually a very pertinent one because the climate models predict in general more rains rather than less rains in the ensemble models that are run. But on the other hand, there is a lot of pertinent modeling, and there's certainly a tremendous amount of data now showing that there is a trend that is not just interannual. Something else is going on, and it seems to run counter to the large global circulation models. And so if you're a government official or you're a UN agency or you're a development partner somehow trying to understand the crisis beyond the immediate humanitarian effect, but what it really signals for the region with the time horizon of 5 or 10 or 20 years, you have a lot of questions. And you have absolutely no reliable place to turn right now. You may know somebody may send you a paper, but there is no serious process of engagement of the world scientific community at a crisis like this. And I was in many, many summit meetings and emergency meetings of FAO and of OCHA and of regional governments, and climate information played almost no role in any of these meetings. That's a deep shame. You had heads of state present at a summit in Nairobi in early September, which I helped to organize with Prime Minister Raila Odinga of Kenya. I brought in information that was sent to me by Mark Kane and by Steve Ziviak and by colleagues at IRI, but that was complete happenstance. There was no there was going to be no climate information at that meeting. otherwise. And there was no other climate information at that meeting, and that's a meeting about facing drought. So this community is not plugged in to real processes in many ways. The science and the policy are disconnected. I don't want to blame the scientists, by the way. I've never seen more disarticulated and overwhelmed policy processes than we see right now. The political processes and the policy processes are in a crisis all over the world. Governments are being overwhelmed by what's happening to them, compounded by the financial crisis, so they're not thinking straight. But they don't know who to call if they want to think straight. They don't know how to find you. It's not even clear who you are from their point of view. And there is no network to engage in that can say, well, there's a debate, because I quickly got into it myself to here's the debate about whether this is long-term change. And immediately, one is led into a very important discussion about what's interannual, what's purely random, what might be decadal, interdecadal ocean forcings, what is possibly longer term, reflecting the long-term anthropogenic changes. And everybody needs to know this debate if they're going to stay alive and if they're going to be able to make anything resembling sensible plans. Otherwise, we're just going to head deeper and deeper into instability in the world. And we're already quite unstable, by the way. There are protests and unrest growing around the world. The rise of real food prices is a startling reality for most of the world. And we are at, by some measures, all-time high, well, not all-time high, sorry. We're at maximum real food prices right now that we haven't seen in quite a long time and that we're completely unprepared for socially and politically. That's why we need a knowledge management process that's far more systematic. And let me mention what I think some of the elements of that are from my perspective as a policy advisor and one who would use these services. First, without question, and I know it's scientifically one of the hardest things, we need downscaling services. Everybody knows the climate's changing, except Republican candidates for president. But everybody else in the world knows that climate is changing. And they want to know, what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my city? What does it mean for my country? What does it mean for my region? And they want an authoritative place to find out what's known about that and what isn't known about that. And such an authoritative place doesn't exist, except if you happen to live in a few high-income countries that have invested in this. Downscaling is a huge organizational as well as scientific challenge. Most weather stations in Africa are not aggregating their information. They're not electronically available. They're not rescued from small offices and massive amounts of paper sitting on shelves. The satellite data and the ground data are not integrated. The data libraries take a real effort to compile. IRI has done that in a few very notable cases, as in Ethiopia. It's a huge, huge contribution to the potential for offering climate services, but it's not done. And then the modeling of downscaling is very hard. The second thing that is absolutely vital is analysis at all relevant temporal scales. This is something that is both scientifically challenging and almost not understood in the policy community and not at all understood in the broad public. What is an ENSO teleconnection? What is an interannual fluctuation? What can we say at this point about decadal scale oscillations that might have to do with the ocean with the longer-term ocean processes, for example. And what is anthropogenic greenhouse gas-induced climate change in a region? Of course, that's a major scientific puzzle, but that's of fundamental importance for any region in the world, and separating those things is part of the job of knowledge management. To say what's known, what's debated, what do we think, what does the literature aggregate to? And we don't have that kind of process working, and we need to have that. Third, every region needs a risk assessment capacity. It needs to go through a long checklist. How are we vulnerable? Are we vulnerable to drought? Are we vulnerable to floods? Are we vulnerable to health crises of what kind? Is it heat waves? Is it vector-borne diseases that are temperature modulated, like malaria, for example? Is it changing dust patterns which could be implicated in meningitis pandemics? Is it waterborne diseases that are temperature modulated? Is it parasitic diseases like hookworm or Ascaris or Trichuris that are definitely temperature dependent? Is it crop failures? And is that from heat stress, from dry spells, from other phenomena of climate change? Is it devastation of the tourist industry by more frequency of extreme weather events? Is it storm surges? Is it destruction of infrastructure? Is it the fact that we're going to have landslides? Is it the loss of biodiversity? Is it the emergence of pests? You need a scorecard. It's a long list. And where do you look that up? If you are Kenya, if you are Somalia, if you are Ghana and you're trying to understand these things. As far as I know, there's no place to look those things up. There's no systematic filling in the boxes, and there's no way that there's an interaction between the international scientific community and the national communities for these risk assessments. And of course, the reason you do risk assessments is the fourth area, and that is preparedness and adaptation. And that also has a long set of boxes or matrices. If you have the risks down the left-hand side, you have several columns of different kinds of preparedness. And of course, it could be infrastructure that is reinforced. It could be crop varieties, seed varieties. It could be introducing different types of water management to be able to overcome temporary dry spells. It could be disaster preparedness. It could be disaster alerts. It could be reinforcement of malaria control. It's a very long list, of course. And it would seem to me that every community, every metropolitan area, every national government is going to be in the business of making such lists and thinking hard about them. And of course, we have many such processes underway right now for cities around the world. New York City has done some wonderful work, I think thanks to our colleagues here, Cynthia Rosenzweig and others, as well as other partners. And of course, IRI has been working on these issues, and I know that all of the organizations around in this room, WMO and NOAA and the UK Met Office and NCAR, also are working on this practical kind of translation of the climate risks to the adaptation, resiliency, and preparedness strategies. But I think it's a work that's just begun. And in general, if you put yourself in the position of a head of state or a finance minister or a security official or the head of OCHA, I don't think that you have right now a feeling that you know what to do, where to turn, how to analyze these things. because it doesn't exist actually on a massive scale. It's complicated, it's expensive. You have to tap into a worldwide scientific community. You have to be able to process the fact that different scientists are going to say different things, so there's a lot of uncertainty. That has to not just end up with the people throwing up their hands and saying it's useless, but rather a better understanding about what the uncertainties and the debates are so that they can be followed by officials and agencies of responsibility. So this leads me to suggest a couple of things. First, my mental image is a call center, or its equivalent, a call center and online services. You want to know what is knowable about your region in terms of its climatology at all temporal scales, its portfolio of risks, and the kinds of adjustments that can be made. And you want to know who can I contact. And ultimately, you want to know, yes, it's www.climateservicespartnership.org. Just get online, type in your international zip code, and out will come not only information, but who to contact and how to mobilize a scientific community that can give you some responses to that. That's what I think we ought to be building here. Second, this needs an active interplay because you don't want only available information online, though that'll be quite wonderful. You want to have counterparts, climatologists principally, who can discuss issues and can talk about the debates, can review the evidence, can talk about the recent literature, can talk about the analytical gaps, can talk about the knowledge that ought to be generated. So there ought to be a contact number, and that contact number ought to connect with scientific colleagues who themselves can mobilize a community of scientists that are expert on the Horn of Africa, expert on the Sahel, expert on the South Asian monsoon system, expert on El Nino teleconnections. Whatever the issues are, there ought to be a way to bring the world pretty quickly together into a brainstorming. And my view of international policy is we would be immeasurably empowered if, when trouble is lurking or worries are lurking, it would be possible to get a group together on Skype for a half day of discussion face-to-face virtually that could address these issues. Because you have no idea how isolated policymakers feel from this kind of information. They don't have access to it. They don't know how to get it. And you can attend one high-level process after another, and this basic information is just nowhere to be found. So even though it's second nature to all of you, it's not second nature to the policy process at all. And it's not static information, and it's not just changing dynamic information, it's interchange information. I don't understand. What about this? How do you interpret this? What does this mean? Someone said this. Is this true? That's the kind of interplay that's really needed to be useful to be able to react. Of course, that brings us to a level of program design. But here, I think the key is for the climatology community to make systematic connections with similar meetings that ought to be happening in the public health community, in the agriculture community, and so forth, because so we know that here's how temperature variability, extreme weather events, the probability distribution of rainfall and dry spells is changing in a particular area. What does that mean for crops? Well, that needs to engage, of course, with the agronomy community. And there is an agronomy community, but it's not necessarily well organized and linked well to the climatology community. IRI is that microcosm internally. It's a wonderful organization. There are others, but I would say there aren't too many others that are able to bring together agronomy, public health, infrastructure engineering, disaster preparedness, and climatology all under one roof. And not everything is under one roof in the world, or should be. We need the partnership outreach. So I think that being able to say, okay, we need to get the agronomists together so that they also can provide the counterpart teams and the counterpart information so that climatology and agronomy can be interacting, not in general IPCC report style, because we have a lot of that, but in downscaled, practical discussions. What does this mean for animal husbandry? What does this mean for the livestock? What did this mean for the crops? What does it mean for the next growing season? That's a huge order. It's going to take years to build those connections. But that's why this is the first meeting of the International Conference on Climate Services, because we should systematically build those connections. Of course, training needs to be part of this, because the information only works when there are people and organizations and agencies that can use the information, update it, ask the right questions, probe, and translate into local programming. So training is a very big part of this. And then I think the final point, something that IRI knows from its daily work very well, I'm sure it's true for every organization, feels that when we talk about a user interface, there are multiple users. So there need to be multiple interfaces. This climate services partnership should be able to take a call from the UN Secretary General, should be able to take a call from OCHA, which is handling emergency relief operations. It should be able to respond to UN agencies. It should be able to respond to national governments, regional organizations, and not least doctors and farmers and others on the ground who all have increasing access to the internet, so that they can log on and see what the weather forecast is, or what the chances of drought are in 3 months. And not everything will be translated by organizations in the future. There's just so much direct online potential for effective interfaces with the local clinic, with a local farmer organization, to understand and also to give feedback on events. So I think the multiple user interface is extremely important. Finally, let me just say a word about my specialty, which is money, as an economist, and something about the financing of this effort. Because we're also, and it's not completely coincidental, also in a financial crisis, and everybody is squeezed right now. And traditional donor agencies are squeezed. NOAA's budget is being squeezed. Everybody is feeling a very, very tough squeeze. So I wanted to recommend a few places to go for financing, which I think are important. In my view, the most pertinent financiers for a lot of what will be needed in the future will be the regional development banks. I think they're going to play a growing role in global finance relative to national governments. So the Inter-American Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, I think they are obvious clients for climate services and for this partnership. And the reason I say it is that they're the ones that are on the front line of making infrastructure finance available. They're the ones that are financing landscape management, irrigation projects, dams, waterways, sewerage, and other major infrastructure that completely intersect with the climate agenda. And they have some money still, and they generally have some capacity, And I know from my own experience, they are very interested in these issues. And I think that they can play a very, very important role in this. So I think trying to mobilize the network of regional development banks as part of the partnership for this would be well advised. I think the Gates Foundation can and should be brought into this process because they are leaders in two of the critical areas right now, and that is agriculture and health. And since agriculture and health are deeply impinged by this, I would hope that they might be interested in some seed funding or challenge grants that could say, okay, we'll put in one for every 9 more that you raise from the regional development banks and so on. And that's a catalytic role that they have liked to play. Third, I think that every government, just about every government, maybe I'm thinking Somalia, maybe I would make an exception, but every government other than a small handful, and I want to include poor countries, should put their own resources into this partnership. Whether it's $50,000, $100,000, a small amount, it doesn't have to be millions or tens of millions, but there ought to be sign-in to the partnership to say there are real services provided, we need to be part of this, we're investing in this. And I think that so I think that the point I'm stressing is that this partnership is not a metaphor, in my opinion, and not a series of meetings, but is a literal organization that is offering services and that has funding for its core operations. And I think governments in recipient countries and users should be paying members of this. Next, I would like to see this get on the G20 agenda. It won't this time, of course, because the meeting is in a couple of weeks, but it could after this, and I can probably help on that to some extent through the Secretary General's office. But it's a matter of making clear what the offer is. What can the climatology community bring? What are the ideas, to be specific? Because to make an offer of services, I think the G20 would understand this. And I think that they ought to take this on as something that needs to be made available. Next, I would certainly like a serious set of propositions and maybe the organization itself to be up and running by Rio + 20. What could be a more concrete outcome for Rio + 20 than a real climate services partnership? Don't ask for permission. Don't fight to get it in some recommendation. Just do it and get it announced at Rio + 20 that the world climatology community, leading organizations, Met Services, WMO, NOAA, and so forth, have joined forces to create an information partnership, online services, access to the global scientific community, and so forth. And I think that that would be a tremendous contribution. There are funded organizations like the GGGI, the Global Green Growth Institute, which is based in Korea, ClimateWorks, and others that I think should help to fund this partnership as well. They've been mainly engaged up until now in mitigation concerns, but this is basically offering the adaptation agenda in a highly constructive way, and I think that that's important. And finally, I do believe that if we can all get together in a very practical manner and make these services increasingly available in practical terms to policymakers, it will strengthen each of our institutions tremendously to be part of this global partnership. It will help NOAA in the U.S. Congress to explain why this is so urgent. It will help Met Services around the world to say what it is that they're contributing to global stability. It will provide an understanding, in other words, among our own taxpayers our parliaments and so forth about why the world scientific community has gotten together at this moment of peril and put together a practical approach to offer timely, serious, scientific, downscaled information. And I think we will all benefit by the public understanding from that. So thank you very much for being here. Please be productive. And I very much look forward to the agenda that you set and the practical approaches that you adopt at the meeting. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Jeff. Our next speaker is Mr. Jeremiah Langwasa, Deputy Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization. Mr. Langwasa holds master's degrees in climatology and development management from Witwatersrand University. He has worked as a university lecturer in geography and environmental studies and with the South African public agencies in the areas of environmental regulation and environmental quality. He's also worked as a senior bank manager. Before becoming WMO's Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Langwasa served as Assistant Secretary General at the WMO. He was also Chief Executive Officer of the South African Weather Service and Permanent Representative of South Africa with WMO, and was a member of the WMO Executive Council. Please welcome Mr. Langwasa.
Good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here, and both on my behalf and Michel Jarraud, who was invited to be present, but due to other commitments is not able to be here. Let me just make sure I have the technology correct. Yeah, I thought we would, instead of going through a long history of the global framework for climate services, going back to earlier discussions that even preceded the World Climate Conference 3. Most of you, of course, were present in that conference. You participated through contributions, various types of contributions, including papers, etc. I thought we would just do a very brief overview of the process. Of course, noting that we do have a side event. I was looking through the file, but I didn't see the details. But there is a side event later today, which will go into much greater detail, and we have the president of WMO and the chair of the Executive Council task team who will make some interventions there. We also have Jeff Love. We had hoped to have a high-level task force member or somebody else of that sort, but we have Jeff Love, who's our services director in WMO, who will also make a presentation. So I won't go into very much of the detail around the GFCS. Nevertheless, I thought it's important to just provide a brief overview of the GFCS and some of the work that went into it to this point, and also the fact that we will not go into the discussion on the climate service. So to echo your perspective, Stephen, is just to make sure that we talk more about what is and what will be required for a successful global framework for climate services, both in institutional terms and in other terms, and then also just to reflect a bit on WMO's contribution and what we bring to the table, in a sense, in ensuring that these activities are a success. I offer this slide first as simply an indication of what some of the challenges are facing us in the future, and just as an example, courtesy of Dr. Wilco Hazelega of the Netherlands Met Agency that I met recently. So if there are other people who are involved in putting this together and I haven't acknowledged it directly, my apology to you. But one of the key things that it indicates is that society is informed by past experiences of weather extremes in adapting or making certain decisions. And that climate change, which will result in changes in extremes, and therefore a need to adapt and to reduce our vulnerability. Of particular interest, of course, from a risk perspective, and you've heard these views already this morning, are the high-impact, low-probability events, such as storms, heat waves, and cold spells. So our ability to monitor and predict variations in climate has increased substantially over the past 2 decades and more, and there's an even ever-increasing knowledge of the causes and the characteristics of seasonal to annual variability on decadal time scales. These changes, of course, are being presently, as we speak, being translated into useful long lead time forecasts, and we also have a greater capability to project future climate, albeit with a level of uncertainty. It is clear that to face this challenge, we need to use the best available scientific knowledge we have, not only to better understand the physical climate system and the Earth system, but to also make this information and knowledge available and accessible to ensure that the best planning decisions are made for the future for humanity's sake. World Climate Conference 3, most of you participated in that, and I won't go into details, but behind all of this was WMO's past experience of bringing together disparate communities focused around a singular agenda, and particularly informed by the success of the first preceding 2 conferences, World Climate Conference 1, some of you might recall, and World Climate Conference 2, that you had the UNFCCC process, in a sense, emerge out of that. We also had the IPCC as a key requirement that came out of that, and you also have the IPCC as a mechanism for assessing our state of knowledge as one of the outputs of those previous conferences. And having convened this meeting where we had 13 heads of state and heads of government present, 81 ministers, and more than 2,500 scientists, most of you in the room were part of that process, was really a recognition that climate information is critical for climate risk management and for taking advantage of climate opportunities in the future. The present service capabilities fall far short of meeting current and future needs and delivering their full potential and their benefits, especially in developing countries, requires a collective effort. It was also recognized that many countries lack the infrastructural, human, and institutional capacities to provide high-quality services, and presently, climate services do not reach those that are most vulnerable and require them the most. But perhaps more importantly was the recognition that a global mechanism to coordinate current and future credible, reliable, and timely climate services accessible to all is without doubt an urgent and pressing need. I won't go into details on this, but part of the process that followed the WCC3 was an intergovernmental meeting which established a task force, and that task force was, amongst others, required to prepare a report on how this global framework for climate services as an outcome of the World Climate Conference 3 would be materialized. Now, this is the high-level task force itself was a mixture of different communities. You had politicians, former heads of state. You had scientists, some from our own community and the weather community, Shindahe and Eugenia Carney. You had different economists. You had different perspectives, developing country, least developing countries, and also small island developing states were represented in this task force. Now, one of the things that the task force did, of course, into informing its work, was also to perform a survey. And in answer to a very simple question, which amongst others, Jeff will probably talk about this later on in the side event in greater detail, was in answer to the question which was, which climate service elements do you need but are currently unable to obtain? And again, picking up on the earlier conversations, you would see that seasonal predictions, climate outlooks, some of the regional downscaling work featured fairly highly on what is required for the future. Our Congress in May of this year made a decision and was tasked by the World Climate Conference 3, you might recall, to make decisions on the report of the high-level task force. And that report, we have copies outside where you can sign up so we can send them to you or make them accessible to you. The task force decided to call it Climate Knowledge for Action, a global framework for climate services empowering the most vulnerable. So within there was already a deliberate choice in terms of where priority should go in addressing and in building this framework going forward. Amongst other decisions made by Congress is to have an extraordinary Congress in 2012, so around this time next year, to make final decisions on the implementation plan of the framework and also the governance structures and other related matters. This is the vision of the Global Framework for Climate Services as is articulated in that report and basically now decided in the intergovernmental process. It has pillars, the most significant pillars of the building blocks, observations and monitoring, research, modeling and prediction, linked into a climate services information system, the ability to move all of that around, the user interface platform in particular, the user interface platform as being the kind of services front of the framework. And of course, the main principle is to build it from the top down in this instance, where the top is the user interface, which informs the rest of the process, but understanding that it is an iterative process. And I'll spend a bit of more time later on in just picking out some of the examples where WMO's contribution matters, but also where, as a partnership going into the future, interfaces may be required. In broad terms, the decisions that are anticipated coming out of the Extraordinary Congress and kind of bringing into fruition what was defined as an operational system, right? That the global framework for climate services has to be an operational system where there is systemic collection of data, research directed at the critical questions being raised by users. And I thought Jeffrey Sachs sort of captured the kind of questions that may be posed by policymakers, which are probably not as linear and as organized as often we in the scientific community would like to have them posed. Nevertheless, we have to react to those. So in the 2012-2015 timeframe is to establish a global system to routinely generate and electronically exchange an extensive set of defined climate data and data products. An initiative in developing countries to upgrade the climate service capacities. Third is an initial suite of new knowledge products with a user interface and particularly developed through multiple initiatives on user interfacing and services development. So very much echoing what Dr. Sachs kind of alluded to. And an ongoing governance mechanism that drives the framework's development, ensuring that all stakeholders that have an interest are engaged and that communities are fully participative, as well as the resourcing and the investments required for it are indeed made available. These were the 8 guiding principles, and these are the 8 guiding principles adopted by Congress as a founding stone for the GFCS. And again, I will not go into any great detail on them, except to emphasize, based on the earlier conversations that you heard as well, is that partnerships are important to avoid duplication, so optimize what we already have is a primary requirement. Maximize on data exchange, where some communities are already not exchanging any data at present. And the climate service is a public good in the first instance, is what one of the principles. that it has to be an operational system, in other words, not just a once-off, but sustainable and sustained into the future. That it has 3 tiers at which it needs to operate, the global, the regional, and the national, and that we need to maximize the use of the climate services, in other words, demonstrate their utility as well, and the priority should be going to the most vulnerable in the first instance. Just picking out one example in the framework where in the diagram, having mentioned the pillars, you would have seen that behind the pillars was capacity development as a sort of all-encircling, because in all the pillars of the framework, it is clear that human capacity or capacity development in broad terms is required. And there are 4 areas really which are key: human capacity development, infrastructural capacity development, procedural capacity, and as well as institutional capacity. And there are gaps in the system at present, and I think the very presence of you and many others in this room is indicative of the fact that in as much as we're a community that is dealing with services, there are significant gaps in areas that need to be filled. And so in this instance, again, I just use, whilst there are encouraging signs globally that these efforts are being addressed, whether in the broader terms of addressing the lack of critical mass in the scientific capacity in broad terms, where in general terms we're talking about a new requirement for capacity in Earth system science and understanding the Earth system in its totality. And there are notable examples of progress being made and new efforts. For example, in the next week or so, we have the Open Science Conference organized by WCRP in Denver, and a significant component of that is bringing a new cadre of early career scientists into this domain, so that we can also have a significant investment required for the future, or to meet present and future needs. And within this capacity development framework, and I just took an investment scenario that was presented by the high-level task team, and of course further analysis will indicate that it is way short of what is required. But if you just took an example, of what the figures they put on the user interface platform, just for capacity building alone, you need in the order of about $10 million per annum of investment. And that's just a small fraction of what is required. And talking about investments, it is clear that the capacity building cloud, if I may call it that, which surrounds the global framework for climate services, requires significant investment, and that this investment for that capacity building effort and for the implementation of the framework itself will be but a small fraction of, if you use as an example, the currently debated Green Fund, which is estimated to require $100 billion a year over the next 5 years or so, starting at $35 billion, that's in the UNFCCC process, that a fraction of that investment would help meet the requirements of offering this framework for climate services by far. And so, however, to realize that kind of investment value means that we have to work collectively to realize this investment by proving that the global framework for climate services, or rather that climate services, would make a huge difference, which otherwise would not be made if it was not in place. Talking a bit about the priorities that were established, I know the previous speaker spoke about 2 in particular: health and water, and agriculture. It is clear that for disaster risk reduction, these were the priorities that were identified by Congress as being key to tackle in the short to medium term: agriculture, disaster risk reduction, water, and health. And these areas, by the way, resonate and align very closely with other global efforts to bring the scientific community together to put their collective wisdom to bear on the current societal challenges we face. Some of you may be familiar with the ICSU, Belmont Forum, and the Social Sciences Council initiative called ESSI, the Earth System Science Initiative, which is based on a number of global challenges. And so this is another opportunity for us to enhance our partnerships working with them collectively. And this brings me to the slide of WMO's contribution to the development of the global framework for climate services. Whilst we are given a stewardship over the framework, what is important is also the value that we bring as WMO to this process. I've already spoken a bit about the experience of bringing together disparate communities, but not only bringing them together to have a chat, but also the kind of programs and organized things that come out of that. So here we recognize that the global framework is a global collective effort, and it requires the engagement of the UN, partners and other stakeholders outside of the UN. It's also a recognition that WMO and its members, capital M, is countries in this case, not just National Met Services. And other co-sponsored programs will provide only a component needed to build the framework. And here, the WCRP, of which some of you participate already in some of the programs, the Global Climate Observing System, some of your observing systems are part of that process already. The WIS, which is the WMO information system, which is a build-on to the GTS, which enables us to move data around, and the WMO Integrated Global Observing System, which is in a sense building on what you normally know as the World Weather Watch Program. Now we have the Global Cryosphere Watch Program and other programs being built in as part of the WMO Integrated Global Observing System. All of these are a key contribution that WMO makes, however, with the recognition that they provide only but a component. I've already spoken about WCRP and its hosting of an open science conference in the next few days, and that we are also excited by the developments on ESSI, where the Belmont Forum, who are the funders of research, and the ICSU, which brings together the academic community in particular, but beyond, as critical partners. You would all know that ICSU is a critical partner of the WMO in co-sponsoring a number of initiatives, including the research agenda. And so that pillar of the framework, which deals with modeling, predictions, and research, the WCRP will be a key contributor, as well as working in partnership with others. But it's also clear then, when we come back to the global framework and you look at those pillars, that there are areas within the global framework for climate services as it stands now where those partnerships are not at their strongest. And one of the critical areas is the user interface platform. And the reason we called it a platform was that there is no program, there is no organized global program at present that deals with that user interface. And in that light, this meeting has particular significance. And so in my concluding remarks then, let me just point out that climate services are key for making information and knowledge accessible. A global framework is key to bringing the current and future capability together. Partnerships are key to the delivery of the full climate services potential for the benefit of society, and a global user interface platform is a key part of the framework. And that even as we proceed with consultations, and you will hear more in the side event on these consultations and the progress being made in the implementation of the framework, is that within each of these pillars of the framework, the user interface, the climate services information system, observations and monitoring, the research modeling and prediction, as well as capacity building, the engagement of partners in the early parts of this process are absolutely critical to ensuring that the related production, availability, delivery, and application of climate services in the key sectors that were identified before is realized in the shortest possible time. And these engagement processes reach beyond governments, but also reach partners and stakeholders. And this is part of that process, and that's one of the reasons why we have a presence and accepted the invitation to the conference. So we look forward to the outcomes of this conference in the effort to realize a truly global user interface platform that is organized and makes accessible to those that need the information in a coherent and timely fashion. So thank you very much for your opportunity.